Mergem mai departe la Pulsul Zilei cu un interviu realizat de colega mea Monica Ghiurcu, personajul, unul dintre cei mai apreciați profesori de relații internaționale din întreaga lume, John Mearsheimer.
Professor John Mearsheimer, you are a very well-known realistic scholar. So please, first of all, explain to us what is the realism in the foreign policy today and in international relations, because I'm very curious to find out which are the central features in this theory today.
Well, there are really two big theories in international relations, and one of them is realism. And realism is really only concerned about the balance of power. And that means that realists care about how powerful states are, how much military might and economic might they have. They don't care whether states are democracies or communist states or authoritarian states. The other theory of international politics that's very popular today is liberal theory. And liberal theory says that whether or not countries are liberal democracies or not is what really matters. And power is not that important. So if you look at the Cold War, a realist would say it doesn't matter whether the Soviet Union is communist and the United States is a liberal democracy. All that matters is how powerful they are.
How the world actually works today?
Well, I believe that the world actually works according to realist principles, and what matters most is power. And for me, the most important event that is taking place in the world today is the rise of China. Since the Cold War ended in 1989, and certainly since the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the United States has been by far the most powerful state on the planet. But that situation is changing for two reasons. One is that China is continuing to rise, and China looks like it's going to be able to compete with the United States because it's going to become so powerful.
And not only economically, no?
No, not only economically, but also militarily. But the second thing that's happened, which Romanians care greatly about, is the resurrection of Russian power. In the 1990s, Russia was a wrecked country. It had very little military power, and it was not seen as being threatening to any of its neighbors. But since the early 2000s, since Putin has been in control, the Russian military has gotten stronger and stronger over time. So most people believe that we now live in a world where there are three great powers: the United States, China, and Russia. Whereas just after the Cold War, it was the unipolar world. There was only one great power, which is the United States. So it's that shift in the balance of power that concerns me the most, and concerns many Americans as well.
What advice would you give to the Romanian politicians in order to make Romania stronger?
Well, the problem that Romania faces is that it's not a very big country. If you compare the United States with Romania, the big difference is that the United States is a super powerful country. And furthermore, the United States does not have any neighbors in the Western Hemisphere that could threaten it militarily in any way. For Romania, on the other hand, it's always been a relatively small country, and it's been surrounded by very powerful countries like Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Soviet Union or Russia. And when you're small and you're surrounded by big countries, you have to be very smart to survive.
That's why it was not very easy for Romanian state to survive in such difficult times. And today, could this rise of Russia could be a weakness, a threat for Romanian state?
I actually think that Russia is not much of a threat to Romania today. And I think there are really two reasons for that. One is that Russia is not that powerful. And over time, Russian power is going to decline. Russia's not going to grow more powerful with time. China is likely to grow much more powerful, but Russian power is likely to decline.
Can you explain a little bit this, please?
Well, first of all,
why?
For two main reasons. One is demographics. That's growth in the population. The fact is that the Russian population is going to shrink over time. So there are going to be fewer Russians in the year 2050 than there are today. Furthermore, the Russian economy is not in good shape. It's too dependent on oil and gas. The Russian economy has not been modernized. It's not a modern industrial economy like the American economy or the German economy. Therefore, Russia does not generate enough wealth to produce a substantial military. So for demographic reasons and for wealth-related reasons or economic reasons, Russia is going to become less powerful with time. But the second thing that Romania has going for it at this point in time is that it's a member of NATO. And that means that the United States is, in effect, committed to protecting Romania against the Russians. So my argument is that Russia is not much of a threat, and to the extent that it is a threat, the Americans are there to protect Romania.
So, do you think that a more realistic West nowadays will get sooner a global or a bigger war, USA against Iran maybe, or Korea, for example? And do you think is still today imminent a conventional war?
Well, I think there is hardly any chance of a major conventional war in Europe, which is what obviously concerns Romanians the most. When I was young, we spent a lot of time thinking about a conventional war involving the Warsaw Pact on one side, which of course would include Romania, and NATO on the other side, which of course would include the United States. It was a serious possibility, but those days are gone. The Soviet Union has gone away. Russia is not powerful enough to threaten to conquer all of Europe, even large portions of Eastern Europe. So there's not going to be a major conventional war in Europe. From an American point of view, there are really three scenarios that matter, two of which you mentioned. One is Iran, where there is a serious possibility that the United States could end up attacking Iran's nuclear facilities in the near future. I don't say it's likely, it's possible. The second possibility is North Korea, because the United States would like to get rid of North Korea's nuclear weapons, and it is possible that the United States might see an opportunity to use its conventional military forces to attack North Korea. But the really dangerous scenario from an American point of view is a war with China. And most Americans believe that there is a possibility. It's a small possibility.
How should we look today at China?
Well, China
as a major possible threat?
Yeah. Here's the basic logic behind China's rise. China has so many people, and its economy is growing at such an impressive rate that if this continues over the next 10 or 20 years, China will be so powerful in Asia that it can threaten to dominate the entire region and even try to push the American military out of East Asia. And the Chinese will tell you behind closed doors that they'd like to push the Americans out of East Asia, and they would like to dominate Asia all by themselves. The Americans, of course, will resist. The Americans will go to great lengths to stay in East Asia and to contain China. So what you're going to have in all likelihood in the future is a competition between China and the United States that looks a lot like the competition between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War.
Please give us the key to understand the role of United States today in the world, because I tried to figure out, could the US dominate the entire world Is this the main goal? In such condition, you already described it.
I think when the Cold War ended in 1989, and certainly after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the United States set out to try to dominate the entire globe. I think there's no question about that. Just look at the giant mess that we created in the Middle East. Look at the crisis that now exists with Russia over Ukraine, which we played a key role in creating with NATO expansion. With regard to China, we thought that we could engage China, that we could trade with China, and China would become friendly, and U.S.-Chinese relations would be excellent over time. That's proven to be false. So the idea that the United States can dominate the globe was a false dream. And we see the wreckage all around us today. And I would note, by the way, this is one of the principal reasons that Donald Trump is in the White House. When Donald Trump ran for the presidency in 2016, he campaigned on the argument that American foreign policy had been a failure, and that included Republicans like George W. Bush and Democrats like Barack Obama, and he was elected. Now, he certainly wasn't elected only because of foreign policy, but that was part of the reason that he got elected. The American people understood that American foreign policy had failed at many turns since the Cold War had ended, and they wanted a change, and that's why they elected Donald Trump.
And Romania, we, the Romanians, what should we expect from Trump administration in terms of economic security?
Well, I think in terms of economic security, the key question is what effect will the Trump administration's economic policies have on the world economy? It's clear that we live in a world that is economically interdependent. This is the era of globalization.
Yes.
So if the American economy goes off a cliff, that has huge consequences, negative consequences, not only
Also
for
here.
Europe, but for Romania as well. So in terms of economic security, what matters the most for Romania is that the U.S. economy continue to do well. Now, in some cases, the United States is playing hardball with countries over economic issues like trade and tariffs. The United States has gotten very tough with the Germans, with the South Koreans, and with the Japanese. Just to pick a couple examples. But fortunately for the Romanians, you have not been in President Trump's gun sights on economic issues, so you're not having any problems there.